Welcome to the SAFETY Chronicles, exploring how to keep people and pets safe from the cycle of interpersonal violence. I am your host, Allie Phillips, founder and CEO of Sheltering Animals and Families Together, the SAFETY Program, a nonprofit organization working with domestic violence shelters to eliminate the pet housing barrier to safety. As the founder, I have led the global movement in helping domestic violence shelters create on-site pet housing while elevating the criminal justice response to how animal abuse links to crimes against people. I am a former prosecuting attorney, internationally recognized legal expert and public speaker, award-winning author, and advocate for protecting vulnerable victims. In this podcast, we will explore how and why animals are harmed in the cycle of family violence and the human-animal bond that keeps victims in harm's way with their pets. Guest speakers and I will share strategies for shelters and professionals working to safeguard survivors, why pet-inclusive sheltering is life-saving, and safety tips for those who need help. None of the content will be graphic. If you are in harm's way, please contact your nearest domestic violence shelter or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Let's get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. And I have a special treat for us today. So I have Carol Wick with Sharity Global here. And Carol, I cannot think of how far back we go. We go back a ways.
Yeah.
We go back a
ways. Yeah, 2005, 2006. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's we go back a ways, and that's kind of how I in a good way. And that's how I would like you to start this off by introducing yourself and your work in the field of domestic violence. So I'm just going to let you explain who you are to the listeners and what you have done in the field.
Well, I thank you, Allie, and I'm really glad to be here today. I have, quite a few years in the field of violence against women and children. Actually started my career back in the 80s, which is just hard to believe, but working with sexually abused children. And that's how I got my master's degree, was actually as a therapist. Spent about 13 years doing work with girls and gender responsive programming for girls, and then moved into a decade running one of the largest domestic violence shelters in the United States. And we really tried to approach that work, having come from a system like child welfare and then domestic juvenile justice. We tried to really create an environment at the DV Center where we were really doing some cutting edge best practice type work and really trying to think outside the box. And so we realized that shelter needed to be, as the brilliant Kim Bildhart says, it needs to be a verb, not a noun. And that we have to make sure that people who really need to be sheltered have the opportunity to come into some place, have very low barrier, but also that most people don't need shelter. And so if you don't need to be sheltered, what do you need? And so we did, by the time I left, we had 19 off-site locations, everything from first appearance at the jails to co-located with child welfare and law enforcement. We were doing a tremendous geographic-based community outreach to businesses and faith institutions. And that year, we actually eliminated homicides in the city of Orlando, which was a first. It was an incredible journey, and from there launched Sharity Global. That was now almost 10 years ago, which is hard to believe. We'll have our 10-year anniversary next year, and we the vision for that was really, how can we take what we've learned around listening to the voices of survivors, of building these processes that are based on what they say they're needing, not what we think they need, not what traditionally we provided. And how do we build that for other nonprofits taking into account the evidence that we know around major donors and what they're looking for before they invest in a nonprofit and write those really big, large checks, which DV centers traditionally don't get. And how do we make sure that we're building these sustainable nonprofits that can do the work? Because violence against women, as we know, is just getting worse, and the institutions and the systems are just collapsing around us. And how can we continue to build those up? So we've done research, we've done international studies. I'm now on the UN Ending Violence Against Women expert roster. I do work with the United Nations. Just did a project down in the Caribbean with them. We're working in Nepal, getting ready to head to South Africa shortly. So the work that we're doing really spans the globe. I have a team now, about 25, and it's just amazing the sorts of opportunities that we've been able to engage in with this methodology that was really built out of the work there at the domestic violence shelter.
Yeah, you've done some very innovative, groundbreaking work. And how we connected all those years ago was you recognized that the shelter in Orlando needed to eliminate the barrier of those who have pets. And I remember visiting on 2 occasions the shelter that you built. I remember visiting when it was in progress, and then I visited after it was all set up. And it's an amazing program that you built, and recognizing the survivors who have pets, and if they don't need sheltering, they still need other resources and other help. So yeah, you've certainly been a leader in the field in that, because I'm trying to think of when it was that you opened the pet housing.
I know we launched the capital campaign in 2007, which a lot of people find interesting because that was the beginning of the market crash. And people were like, "You're crazy. Why would you launch a capital campaign in the middle of one of the largest financial crises that we'd faced in a very, very long time?" And it was because we needed the facility, but we also needed those new donors. And we paid for that facility in about 6 months, all cash. They were all private donors. We did not get any government money. We had a lot of help from the government. The local animal services was tremendously supportive in helping us with the design and the strategy behind how to build it. Because we had a daycare center on site. We had I think when it was finally done, we had 175 beds plus a neonatal unit where women could come in directly from the hospital. It was specifically designed for moms with newborns. So the shelter was at that time, we combined the shelter with a warehouse, which was really one of the smartest things we could have done, because the kennel was on one side, and was actually fairly small, and then we had this giant warehouse, which then allowed us to store food and supplies for the animals, but also we could get large in-kind donations. You get that somebody who wants to donate 100 pillows. What do you do with them all? We had a warehouse. So it was a really amazing facility, and we were able to separate that for 2 different types of donors too. Ones that wouldn't fund pets, but would fund the survivors, and then the ones that were really interested in the pets. But your help was invaluable in that, because building a shelter is one thing. If you build a daycare center, there's all kinds of different standards that are required. Commercial kitchen versus a regular kitchen, But a kennel is such a unique building, and the thought that has to go into that, both from survivors being able to access it to, being a kind of a facility. And I remember you telling me this, and I really took it to heart, is it has to be a facility where I would keep my pet there. Right. And so I wasn't going to build something that I personally And we did the same thing with the daycare. Would not leave my child there, wouldn't leave my pet there. And so we used top quality kennels. We made it beautiful and bright and inviting. We used all the protocols, and yeah, it was a lot of work, but we had so many donors that were so excited and so supportive, and it allowed us to build a second fund, which we called Marvin's Fund, after one of the donors' pets, um, who tragically, every year we had a pet host our walkathon that we did, Pause for Peace Walk. And tragically, this dog had a heart attack right before the walk. And so we named the fund after Marvin, and that is our veterinary fund. And it continues to this day as the veterinary fund. And so that was for any pet that either came into shelter or just a survivor had that a perpetrator may have injured, that needed some sort of medical care, shots, whatever it needed in order to be in the kennel. But they were commercial grade quality kennels. And then on occasion, we would allow survivors to keep pets in their rooms with them. But that was because of the tight quarters, that was a little less likely that we would do that, just for the pet safety more than anything. But yeah, that was again nearly 20 years ago that we built that facility.
Yeah, yeah, and just the the can-do attitude that you had during a recession. It just impressed me so much, which is why I was very honored when you agreed to be on the board of directors for the SAFeTY program, because you bring such knowledge in so many different facets in this industry. And then now seeing what you're doing with Sharity Global is just, it's just amazing. And, so one thing that I would really like, the shelters who are listening to this podcast, do you have some examples of how Sharity Global has helped domestic violence agencies, kind of the ways that you are there to help them? Do you have anything that you can share?
Yeah, and actually, I kind of go back to this, what I was saying earlier about a theoretical model of what donors want. I've published lots of research, and one of the things that I've always tried to do is not reinvent the wheel. And Mackenzie Scott gets advised by Rockefeller Philanthropic Partners. They tell her what to look for before she makes a donation. Nowadays, they make all her donations for her, but still, they have a model of what they tell large, wealthy donors to look for. So that's what we help nonprofits build. And I think it's something that is really important, because when we had the pandemic hit, many shelters, about 220 shelters across all of North America and through the Caribbean, participated in a study that we did. And we asked them, did you have these 5 factors? Are these things in place? So we wanted to know, first of all, how were they doing pre-pandemic? Did they have these 5 factors in place that donors are looking for? And how are they doing now? It was really about 18 months into the pandemic. And it actually led to a lot of work that we've done with the YWCA USA with their shelters. And what we found is that the first thing that the donors really look for is they want to know you have a plan. And not just, oh, we want to do this. They want to see a written plan, a business plan that says, here's who we are. And 3 years from now, if you invest in our nonprofit, here's what we're going to accomplish. And it has to be some sort of moving of the needle, and something that you can actually prove. So it can't be, we're going to serve this many people, because what we found is that 75% of domestic violence shelters did not have any type of plan at all, none. And the 25% that did have a plan, it was some little document that they stuck on a shelf somewhere. They might pull it out and look at it. There were a few that did actually have business plans, but the vast majority of them were just operating day to day. And I get that, you get that. You're so busy and you're so overwhelmed. The idea of stepping back and taking 4 to 5 months, which is what it really takes, to say, how are we going to rethink how we're doing business, make sure that every single thing that we do actually has an impact, is actually making a difference, not just for doing it because it's a historical program. We're going out and doing BV 101. And we've done this a lot with folks of whether it's the child advocacy programs or domestic violence shelters. Of when you go out and you do that 1 hour presentation or you do 3 hour presentation with youth, is it really doing anything? And what we find most of the time is absolutely does nothing. It makes no difference whatsoever. So why are you wasting your time? So we had at Harbor House, we redesigned all of our training programs so that we knew that they had an impact. We had one thing we wanted people to do, and that was recognize if someone was in danger and tell them where to go to get help. That's it. And then we followed up and we asked the question, did you do this? And we found that 80% of people did. So we knew we were having an impact. And that's what donors are looking for. They don't want their money to go serving this many pets or this many sheltering this many women. Because the other thing that we know is that the research in Chanley versus Chanley did a study, and they found that 75% of women who go into a domestic violence shelter end up either homeless or back with their abuser because the housing options are not available to them. 75%. Now that to me is a failing model.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be doing something different. So we go in and we help build that business plan. We help make sure that you have outcome measures, meaning because you provide shelter, because you provide outreach, because you provide groups, because you provide a kennel, what happens? That's what donors want to fund. We help them build a 3-year budget to cover that plan, and that becomes their campaign. And then we launch that campaign with the right team that has the right training, both board and staff, and then donors. And usually enough donors are in your database, believe it or not, but people haven't wealth screened. They don't know how to look at their databases, how to segment them, and how to then do the cultivation and stewardship that they need to do in order to move those donors up the pipeline to be able to fund that plan. So that's the heart of what we do at Sharity. And we love working with domestic violence programs. We're working with a violence prevention program in Minnesota right now. We've done work in just about every state in the United States with domestic violence organizations, Long Island and California and Arizona and Nevada, you name it. But what we really feel passionate about is making sure that you have what you need to really be successful, not only in what you're doing, but in presenting it to your donors so that they see that you're actually a good investment because you're actually doing things that make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Oh, hey, if I didn't have a cat go across the Zoom screen, this would not be the SAFeTY Chronicles podcast. That's a given. So I love that. So I love all of that. And, and it even just inspires me to want to plan better, to have a better, more impactful end result. And I think that's just fantastic because it's so needed. I mean, it is. I mean, there's a lot of just day-to-day survival. Let's just, you're kind of on the hamster wheel and
Mm-hmm.
but it's like, really, what impact are you making? So, I love the mission of really what you're focused on. And so, this gets me to this part of the year.
Mm-hmm.
We're going into Giving Tuesday, after Thanksgiving. We're going into year-end giving. And so, what advice do you have for the domestic violence agencies of how they can really capitalize on this? And then how can Sharity help them?
Well, year end is when most nonprofits make anywhere from 40 to 60% of their donations if they've done it right. And it's, later in the year. So if you haven't already started planning, you're really, really, really behind. I always recommend that somewhere around September, you send out an impact report. Again, my rule of thumb is if you can count it on your fingers, it's an output, it's not an outcome. So really talking about, how many families did you get housed? How many, how significantly were you able to reduce children's trauma in the work that you were doing, whatever it might be. But talking about some of the initiatives that you have and the outcomes that they have, and saying thank you. Stewardship should be done all year long. And so many nonprofits forget the stewardship, the thanking, and forget how to do that. They might send a thank you letter after they get the gift, but they don't continue to say thank you. So I would really step back and say, okay, what is, and we have a downloadable year-end plan that you can get off of our website. But really stepping back and saying, okay, there's a presidential election this year. How do we make sure that we're timing around that? Because people are going to be very distracted this year. Making sure that you've got a very consistent ask that you're doing with specific dollar figures, ideally stratified to the donor giving level. So you'd have, even if you just have two different levels, one for major donor prospects and one for smaller donors, you might give that $25, $50. And sending out a hard copy mailer sometime no later than October this year. The idea of sending anything out in November is way, way, way too late. Following up with a couple of emails, making sure that you've got an email drop the week after Christmas, between Christmas and New Year's, and making sure that you are focusing on something that someone can do that will actually make a difference. So link it back to a specific dollar amount. There's actually a great article in the Chronicle Philanthropy this past month about how much higher the donations are if you link it back to a specific service that you're providing, which begs the whole thing of, do you know how much it costs to do business? But that's a whole nother podcast. But really making sure that you're saying, to get that safety manual out to a domestic violence shelter, this is how much it costs, as opposed to the technical assistance and training costs this. So you can fund one of these two things, and here's what will happen as a result. And here's a great story about an organization that did and was able to keep a family together. And probably because my background is in family preservation, back in my roots in the 80s and early 90s, I talk about family preservation because people who donate to animal causes like to donate to animals. They don't necessarily consider the human being that's also in danger at the same time. And so I talk a lot about one of the primary purposes of a kennel or any type of pet service at a domestic violence organization is family preservation, is keeping that family together so that those survivors don't have to abandon their pets, or worst case scenario, that they're murdered, and keeping that whole family intact and together, and then healing that trauma that would have arose from having to separate the family.
Yeah.
So being able to just tell that story, I think, resonates. And then really thinking through for your organization, once you get those pet donors on board, how do you start to move the needle to help them understand that there are pet deposits that are needed, that there's a family attached to this animal that you care about. And we have to make sure that the whole family is safe and supported and thriving, so that that animal also has that home that's safe and can do its duty, which is being part of the family and being that healing core, which animals are, as we both know. So, I mean, I think that's my main suggestion for year end. And I have a lot of clients that we're building in thankathons at year end, and just a week of saying thank you, sending out cards, right? Having board members call people and just say, I just want to say thank you for everything you've done for us over the last year, even if it's just leaving a message, emails, short videos, whatever you can think of, making sure that you just are saying thank you as much as possible. People have been getting, I don't know about you, but I get 4 or 5 text messages a day from some political candidate. Rarely am I getting a thank you. So this is the time of year, especially this year, to just say thank you as much as you possibly can.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, you make a good point about, tapping in. It's tapping into a new donor database of people
Mhm.
who love animals. They love their pets, and that's such a key topic that I talk with the domestic violence shelters about. That you're not taking those people away from the animal causes that they do support. You're just adding, because I don't know, there's something about people who have pets. They always donate, even in a
Mhm.
downturned economy. It doesn't matter. They find a way to donate. And it's just it's an added bonus. And when a shelter is able to house pets, not only do they have access to those donors, but they can then start educating those people who probably have no idea that they're in the community as a sheltering agency, all the opportunities and resources they have. Because then that donor may say, oh my gosh, I have a cousin who really could benefit from your services. And it's just like, it's like
Oh,
exponential, just
people
because
don't.
of the pets.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's an incredible opportunity to educate a whole new group of people about the link between domestic violence and animal abuse. And
Yeah.
most of them have no idea. They will be incredibly passionate supporters after that. Having some sort of adding a pet walk or some sort of pet related fundraiser raises that awareness. And I always feel like if you can tie mission and fundraising together, it's a win-win, right? So we're raising awareness and we're doing raising money. And the kennel brought in more planned gifts, people who didn't have children, but who had a pet. And we brought in more planned gifts for the kennel and for the services that we would link them back to, the people that were attached to those animals, obviously, than the shelter ever brought in. That was one thing that really surprised us, was all of the planned gifts that we had and donors that were putting us in their will.
Yeah,
Um,
one thing that I still have in my safety program presentation is a photograph walking in to the pet part of your shelter. On this wall are all the donor tiles, just
mhm.
all of them. And and I tell the other shelters, I said, people who have pets want to honor and memorialize their pets.
Mhm.
Businesses like to see their names on there, and that's just such a simple thing to do. But that is something that I've really noticed about the pet community. Like, I cannot tell you how many of the memorial plaques I have for my cats. It's like, because I want
Yeah.
to see it when I go to these locations. And yeah, and that was such a cool thing that you did, because people will do that, and they will they
Yeah.
will they will plan a gift to
Well,
something that they care about.
yeah, and it was such an easy thing for us to do because we could just add the tiles as we got them. The wall was just a regular concrete wall, and we had little photo tiles, and people could upload a picture of their pet. They could add whatever they wanted on it, design their photo tile. We would then have it printed. They could pay a little extra and get a box or a tile for home. And then we would shoot them a picture once it was up on the wall and say, thank you so
Mhm.
much. When survivors come in, they'll be able to see all these pets. And yeah, it was a really amazing ongoing fundraising and revenue strategy for us.
Right.
Something like that is a really easy thing to do. I think obviously naming opportunities are a really good opportunity for that sort of thing. But I think when you're going out into the community and obviously talking about the link between domestic violence and animal abuse is important, but I think it's also really important, and you're going to be joining me on a webinar shortly about just the idea of low barrier. And this is a conversation in the homeless community as well. I know here, I'm from Central Florida, and there is one domestic violence shelter, the one that I ran, that has a kennel, and not a single homeless shelter that allows pets. And so what we do kind of inadvertently, and I see this working across domestic violence programs and homeless shelters across the United States, is that we put barriers up for access. And we say to people, oh, we recognize that you're in danger, but you have to meet all of these barriers and jump through all these hoops, or you can't come in. If you have a child over the age of 13 who's male, you can't come in. Or if you have a pet, or if you have, name it. And we create barriers, and it's truly one of the reasons that the system is not working and we're not making headway. And what we then do is we blame them and we say, well, she could have gone into shelter, or they shouldn't be living in an encampment. And here in Florida, as of October 1st, it is illegal to sleep in your car or sleep in public. You will be arrested. So you can imagine a domestic violence shelter calling a shelter. They have a pet. There is no place to go. Maybe they have a 13-year-old male child as well, or whatever the barrier is that they put up, and they end up sleeping in their car, or God forbid they pitch a tent in the park someplace, and they're all arrested. And now mom's arrested. She's going to lose those kids.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to go back to the abuser, and now she's got an arrest. And we are just really, as a society, making it so hard. So you really have to ask yourself, what are the barriers that we have put up as an organization that we blame people for not accessing services, or the public, or the social welfare, child welfare, the police, whatever, blame them for not accessing those services, when in reality, there are donors out there that will help you break down those barriers.
Mm-hmm.
There are staff that will be more than happy to take turns in the kennel. There are, rules and your guidelines for how to run a kennel make things so easy. It's not the simplest thing to do, but it is something that we have to really be thinking about if we're going to create these programs that are really going to help people, versus create another failure for them, which
Yeah.
just makes it for the next time.
And I sometimes, when I have to kind of have a little tough love with the shelter, I just point blank tell them, donors are not going to donate to you as a shelter if you have a barrier to those who have pets. 66% of Americans have at least one pet. So do you want to be known as the shelter that is not serving 2/3 of your community? Who wants to donate to that?
Right.
And that right there, if I can just get them to recognize that, it's like, okay, now let's get the wheels rolling. Okay, let's move forward. So I mean, it is all about education. So you mentioned you have this webinar series, and it's happening right now. Can you talk a little bit about that and who it's for?
Yeah, actually, it's for anybody who's working in the nonprofit sector. And what we're doing is we're going to be doing got two. This is the first a 3-part series, and then we're going to be doing another one in early 2025. But we're really trying to open up conversations around how we do services and how we address some of the more difficult aspects of the work that we face in the nonprofit sector. So the first in the series, which will be up on YouTube shortly, was all about participatory services and processes, and how do we make sure that when we're doing that planning, when we're working with survivors or whoever we're working with, that their voices are an integral part of the work that we're doing, and that we're also listening to the voices and the concerns of our donors. And so how do we marry those two? How do we take what the donors are saying that they want versus what our survivors or what our clients are saying that they need? And the 3 women that were on the conversation, the first webinar, are just truly some of the most brilliant minds. They're amazing. I really encourage you to watch it when it comes out. You can sign up at charityglobal.com and be on our mailing list, and we'll send you a link to it. But the the idea that people who have lived experience are experts. They know this work. And that's not something that's foreign to the domestic violence field, but we really don't integrate those voices. And very dear friend of mine had a person who was formerly homeless speak at her fundraiser. She paid him the same amount that she paid the expert that they flew in to speak, who was an author of a book. And I was like, I had never heard of that before. And she said, why? He's just as much an expert as the other man is. And it's really coming at it from a perspective. So I would challenge you, how many of you in October are going to have survivors take time off of work, come to your event, and are you going to compensate them?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to recognize them as an expert in the field? Because they're just as much as an expert as that CEO because they've got lived experience.
Yeah.
And we have to start valuing that lived experience and listening. I had staff call me one night and they said, we have a survivor and she wants to sleep in the kennel with her dog. And I said, okay, get her a blanket and some pillows and let her sleep in the kennel. You know, we couldn't let the dog in the shelter because it was a larger dog and it would have scared some of the kids and things. But I said, what's the problem? We got cameras you can watch. I mean, let her sleep with her dog. I mean, so many times it's just about listening to the survivors and letting them, understanding that what we feel is not possible is possible. And that's what this series is about. The first part is about how do you incorporate those voices. This next series that we're doing in October, which you'll be on, as well as one of our clients in Long Island, we're going to be talking about how we throw these barriers up. And obviously, you'll be talking about pets and that sort of thing. We have Ashley from Domestic Shelters who's going to be joining us, talking about work that they do. And then Josh Hansen from Safe Center in Long Island is going to be talking about the labels that we slap on survivors, like rape victim or domestic violence or human trafficking victim. And then they get only specific services that the donor or the funder says that they get, as opposed to looking at them as a whole person and understand that most survivors that come to us have polyvictimization, and we just need to ask them what they need rather than looking at the label of the type of victimization that they've suffered and then putting them off on a path of the type of services we think that they should get. So, and then the final series is going to be about really myth busting and the old adage of people won't come into shelter, they prefer to sleep outside, things like that. And people across the country who have literally emptied encampments by sitting down and talking to people who are living on the streets and saying, if we took away the barriers, what would they be and how could we create an environment where you would not sleep in the woods, you would sleep in a shelter so we can get you the help that you need. And so those are the first of the 3-part series. And then rolling into January, we're going to be focusing on things that we're going to hit a little closer to home, like physical health crisis that we're seeing in nonprofit leadership. So many of our clients are ending up in the hospital because they are just literally burning their bodies out, not only just their minds and their souls.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about leadership transitions and founder syndrome and long-term transition after a long-term CEO. And then we'll be talking about another critical topic around nonprofit management and the health and vitality of your organization. So we hope you join us for the series. They're completely free. You can sign up and join us and be part of the discussion or get it afterwards and as an on-demand or listen to it in your car. But we're hoping to add some conversation to some of the brilliant clients that we work with and bring in some of the top voices in the country to talk about things that people aren't necessarily talking about right now, but need to be.
Yeah. So if a shelter or any nonprofit is listening to this and thinking, oh yeah, this is what we need. Like this is we have been dropping the ball and we need to pick the ball up and start running with it. How can an agency connect with you, reach out to you to have that conversation about getting started?
Well, we absolutely love working with organizations. Like I said, there are violence against women organizations. I have a team that is some of the top domestic violence experts in the country, really dynamic, amazing incredible people. You can reach out to us at hello@charityglobal.com. That's probably the easiest one. And or go onto our website, charityglobal.com, and there's a contact us form. And just give me a call, we'll give you a call, have a conversation about where you're at. There's also an Are You Ready assessment on our website that will tell you, are you ready to really do major gifts? And it'll give you a score. There's a couple of different organizational health assessments and things like that. But we have all sorts of tools and tips and templates that we work with organizations specifically around violence against women, where we can calculate economic impact and other things that really will elevate your fundraising. So it's a great opportunity to really be thinking about those barriers and the cash that you might need to overcome them in the ongoing fundraising. I really, to everybody who's out there, I mean, I've been there, right? I 23 years, I did nothing but fundraise for women's issues. And I would say that the nonprofit, domestic violence nonprofit sector is one of the most under-resourced, and we know this nationally. Violence against women is one of the most under-resourced issues. But I honestly think a lot of that we do to ourselves. And we do it to ourselves because we don't have a plan. We keep talking about outputs, which means we're really busy, but nothing is getting better. We talk about how many women are dying and how many, I mean, you look at the NNEDV point in time count every year, how many women we're turning away. 7,000 women a day are being turned away from shelters in the United States. 7,000. And then we have 75% of those that do get in end up homeless or back with their abuser. Why would anybody write a check?
Right.
We have to be doing things differently.
Yeah.
You really have to have the courage. And I know so many organizations that are doing it differently. And those are the ones that you see that are thriving, that are getting large impact gifts that major donors are investing in. And it's not because the work that you're doing isn't important. It's not that shelters aren't important. They are. It's that they're just telling the same story we've been telling since the 1970s, and it's not changed. And saying if you don't give us money, people will die is not going to raise you the kind of money you need to be stable and do the work that you need to do. So if you're one of those nonprofits that's ready to start shifting the needle and being courageous, doesn't matter how big you are, reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you and see if we can help, or if maybe just some of our free tools and templates can help.
Well, Carol, this has been very eye-opening. Thank you so much for all you've done your entire career and how you've shifted and created Sharity Global. I mean, that's having a global impact. So, and I'm very appreciative of all you've done being on the board of the SAFeTY program. I mean, your knowledge and expertise is I mean, it's fantastic, and it's what we need for this organization. So thank you so much for being here. And if you're listening, just reach out to Carol and Sharity Global and just have that conversation. I mean, that's the thing. Don't hesitate to have the conversation, and then from there you can make a decision. We're all given a fork in the road, and you can just decide at that point, but you can't make a decision if you don't reach out and have the conversation. So Carol, thank you so much.
Thank you, Allie. It's always a pleasure.
If you are in harm's way and need help, please visit the Pet Inclusive Shelter listing at safetyprogram.org, call your nearest domestic violence shelter, or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Want to support our efforts and help us keep the SAFeTY Startup Manual free for domestic violence shelters? Consider donating at safetyprogram.org/donate. Your donation saves lives.